Eh, very well.
Okay. What is trade union or what is labor union? I want to believe that, like I said earlier, labor union are used concurrently or interchangeably with trade union, but there is
Mm.
a slight difference. So on this slide, what we look at is majorly the labor union. Then later we try to identify what specifically trade union is. Types. Labor union most time it's entail people that are working, people that are in employment. Those that are employed constitute majorly the labor union. So what we are saying is those that are not in employment, they are not they may not be part of labor union. Labor union is organization of workers who have come together to achieve common goals. So when we are talking about people that are in employment, that are working for any organization, it doesn't matter which industry, when they come together to achieve common goal, that is a labor union. Another way of looking at it is an association of wage earners, salary earners, for the purpose of maintaining or improving the conditions of their employment. So it's an association, people who come together. Common goal is majorly on how to maintain or improve the condition of employees' employment. Another way of looking at it, most time they are like an organization. Apart from being an association, it can as well be looked at as an organization that stand for or represent the working population. So like I said earlier, they are majorly people that are working, people that are already in employment, either in private or public sector. So it is like an organization that stand for or represent people and speak on behalf of people, act on behalf of people, and such action and or any action taken is always binding. So another way of seeing it, labor unions are voluntary association of employees. So why do we use the word voluntary? It simply means somebody or an individual employee might decide not to be part of such association. I hope you understand that clearly. So we have situation or instances where some people might claim I am not part of that union, despite the fact that you are working. And there are some others that whether they can participate or not, by law, they are not supposed to be part of such union. So it's a voluntary association of employees as well as employers formed to protect and promote the interest of their members. Even though it's the interest of their members that they are fighting for, but like you can see it here, any person that is non-member can as well benefit from what. So most time when the advantages come, the non-members as well might benefit from the advantages of the. So hence, labor unions appear to be the most suitable groups for balancing and improving employer-employees relationship. So it is just like an avenue through which you can balance the relationship between employees and employers. So aside knowing what labor union is, don't mind the fact that I stroke it here, trade stroke labor union. But like I said earlier, most things that are written here, they are these explanations that I've just given, they are majorly on what labor union is. But going beyond what labor union is, when we look at the types, we have different types of labor union. Bef- I would now like to explain what a trade union is differently from a labor union within the types. We can have national or local union. But when we are talking about the national or the local union, we have to identify what a trade union is. Trade union is majorly an association of people that are in employment in the same line or in the same sector, in the same line of business. It can be either within the same industry, or it can also be the same line of skill. So most time when we identify what a trade union is, we have to be conversant with people that are in the same line of business. So trade union is one arm of labor union. So labor union is just like a collective umbrella, a wide umbrella that embrace different types of trade union. So labor, generally people working regardless of industry, regardless of sector. But trade union talks about people working in the same line of business or the same skill or the same industry. So trade union is one arm of labor union. So labor union has many trade unions under it. So when we look at the labor movement in Nigeria, we will identify how many arms of trade union do we have in Nigeria under the Labour Congress. But before we get to that, let's just quickly look through what we mean by the types. Well, like I said earlier, we can have national. It for a particular trade union, let's pick the Nigerian journalists or National Union of Nigerian Journalists (NUJ) or the teacher (NUT). When you pick a particular trade union, we can have different branches. That is what we call local within the same skill, the same industry. And we can also have the collective or pulling together of different local. So we can have the national. So we have the national or local unions within which we can have either industrial or skill union. So I will try to use example of teachers. For example, when we talk about teachers, they have the same skills. Under that, we have people that they are in the education line or in the education sector. So that can come under industrial unions, a cross section of workers from various trades or within the same industry. So when we talk about the education sector, automobile industry, steel workers, people that are in the same industry, those ones come
See
under
the lecturer.
industrial unions.
Yes.
But we can
Yeah.
have
I
industrial
have to go now. Let me go and attend to.
we can
Let
also
me go
have
and do my
industrial
lecture.
unions as national. So combination of
Mine is
different
coming to stay with.
local unions make up the national. So the national
Mine is
coordinate
coming. Mine is
the activities of different local unions. Apart from the industrial union, we have the craft union. We have ready examples of people that have the same skills, that are in the same line of activities. So these are organization of particular section of same skilled workers. They come together and form unions. So the craft unions can as well be at local level and at national level. Like I said, the national is just like the one that will coordinate all the activities of different branches. We have typical example of ASUU. ASUU, we know we have different branches, the local ones. different schools, their arms. And when we talk about the national, we have the national comprising of different branches. So apart from the industrial unions and the craft union, we also have the general union. General union may not be people in the same industry, they may not be people in the same with same skills or the same line of business. But what is common to general union is the fact that they are workers, regardless of the industry or the type of skill. They are workers, and for such, it is just like we belong to general union of people that are working. And a typical example is this one is like a labor union, the NLC, Nigeria Labour Congress, like I said earlier. It's just people that are working generally, regardless of where you are working or whether you have the same skill. So we should just stick to three major types: the industrial unions, the craft
General.
union, and the general union. And like I said, within the industrial union, you can have both national and local. Within the craft, you can have both national and local. And the general one too, you can have the national and local within those three. So apart from these three types, most trade unions or labor unions, whether you have it as trade union or labor union, they have objectives. Objectives, the major objective or the ultimate objective is that they are set up to protect their members, from exploitation. And exploitation can be of different form. It can be the physical one, it can be financial one, different form. So exploitation in different form. But we will try to identify what this major objective is within the roles that labor union and trade union play. The roles, I will I have six highlighted here, but beyond these six, we have more. We can, on a good day, we can conveniently identify up to up to 10. But at times we need to be careful when we are identifying these roles. The reason is because some might be embedded in another, one or two might be embedded in another, and there will be no need to repeat. But while I'm explaining these roles, we may identify one or more that cannot form under any of these ones that I highlighted here. The first one is trade union provide formal and multi-step procedure for grievance settlement. What this simply means is that as far as formality is concerned, they make it in a formal way and follow procedures to settle grievances. But beyond the formal way, when we identify to what extent is formality, it is something that is backed with law, something that is backed with constitution that has been formally accepted, which is why any union that does not document their activities, whatever decision or whatever action they take might not be binding. So as far as trade unions are concerned, they provide formal and multi-step procedure for settlement of grievances. Another one is that they negotiate on behalf of members on labour contracts. Labour contracts for some organization are well documented. Some might just be spoken words, especially when we have organizations that are private organizations that are not all that formalized. But whether it is written or whether they are well documented or not, we have labor contracts. So even if we have a sole proprietorship, a one-man business that employ just a single employee or 2 or 3 employees. We have a situation where you tell them the terms of working. You specify, and if the person is in agreement, then you. So labor contract generally might be well documented, oral or whichever form. So unions are the ones that negotiate on behalf of members on all these labor contracts. Another one is they maintain and improve suitable forum for quick dissemination of information that is applicable to every member. They make it readily available. They ensure environmental and legal protection. Like I said earlier, I said different forms of exploitation. They act on behalf of their member when the members cannot speak. So it is just like collective voices spoken through just one person or just one forum. And at another time, they can act as legal protector to their members. For instance, any issue or any case that affects them generally, they provide legal backing. For instance, the length of job tenure, the wage payments and all that. So most time they act, they ensure protection, and now the protection also extend to the working environment that is safe, that is conducive, that can enhance efficiency and effectiveness of labour services. So all these protection are part and parcel of what you can readily find, what the labour union does. Another one is they reduce voluntary labour turnover. What labour turnover means, the rate at which a particular labour or labour a particular employee leave one job for the other. So when we have a situation where somebody will work for some time and once not satisfied leave the job for another, the trade unions stand to at least ensure that the rate of leaving one job for the other is maybe minimal. Even if not minimal, at least it is controlled to some extent. So one of the ways through which that is done is to make sure that the wage rate or the salary is not constant. Try as much as possible to make sure that there is wage raise. And one of the major consideration is whenever any employee want to leave a job for another, the consideration is how much are they earning. So they reduce voluntary labor turnover. That's another role played. Another one is they raise or provide channels to improve employment productivity. I've heard of unions generally that make information available to every other member on skills improvement, on level of knowledge that will be needed to make job more productive. So most time it is through labor union, this collective agreement, this collective efforts that help some employee to improve their productivity or to improve their efficiency. So apart from these 6 roles that I've identified, we can talk about more roles that a good trade union play. So on your own, you can still identify more. I know some of us belong to a union, and we can we know the roles they play on our behalf. So we can through that identify more roles, but we should try as much as possible to avoid repeating roles so that any role that has already fall within this mentioned one, we don't need to mention it again. When we The next slide is when we talk about the origin. I've said it earlier that there is a formal way, a legalized way of passing information across to either the aggrieved one or the ones that is causing the unpalatable situation. What I mean by that is that either between the employers of labour that are the one that are maybe exploiting others, or the employees, whether they are the aggrieved ones. Most time the unions are the is the formalized one, the acceptable one, the legalized one. But it didn't start on such level. It didn't start at such level. So when we talk about the origin of trade union, we can trace it back to when industries there when there is industrial revolution, when there is industrialization in the 18th century in Europe, in Britain to be specific, in Britain when there is so people when there are more people getting into working for wages and salary, earning living, earning the source of living, the need the need to have one voice, a common ground arose. So as a result of that, there 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 was more agitation for people to come together and pick representative, someone that will speak on their behalf. So that is where it started from, industrial revolution in the 18th century. We have some important dates within the 18th centuries, but those few dates, you can at least note them in your module. In your module, there's just a brief explanation on how it sprang up, where it started from, and when it is actually legalized. It started informally, sort of, and at a point from the onset, it was seen as people, workers or labourers that are just speaking or saying things against their employers. But later on, it was legalized, and that with that legal and constitutional backing, it makes it easier for people to speak up, not going outside the law. And apart from the 18th century, it started to in on informal level in some other countries or some other continents apart from Europe. So it extended to America, it extended to Africa, then to Nigeria. But it was just starting up in the 18th century too in all those areas, but it became more prominent in the 19th century. So there are also some important dates that we need to take note of. You take note of when it's actually started and legalized in Europe. Another way is when it actually started and legalized in Nigeria. I know it started in Nigeria in I think 1897 or so, but with all those things, it was just like at the skeletal level and mostly not legalized, but it became more prominent in the 19th century. So like I noted here that it was formalized here in Nigeria in between 1938 and 1939 with different names, different body. You will have details of that in your module. But the one we recognize now, a major body that we recognize now as Nigerian Labour Congress, is it was established in 1978. Although I think it was formed so in 75, but it became more established in 1978. But I will implore us to go through the module and identify more things about Nigerian Labour Congress, apart from when it started. In what form did it start? I know it had a lot of issue. It used to be one called one name before. It's now, NLC, from the different types of union, we will realize that it's more or less like the umbrella for all different types of trade union. And for different union to have one voice, to come together under just one umbrella is not easy. So which is why it will be good to at least have an idea on the brief history of NLC and what before it actually became Nigerian Labour Congress in 1978, and all the rules and all those rules that were pointed out, those rules. I know one of the rules is that for any congress, they must harmonize different unions, different trade unions come under the Labour Congress, but they have to identify the key trade unions. Not, people can say our own is different, we branching out in different forms. So they harmonized all the trade unions, make sure that key sectors or key unions or key industries are well represented. And then I know as at that time, as at a point in time, they had different trade unions comprising of 42 trade unions under NLC alone. So which is why it is important for NLC to have a common ground that will at least address the issues or the interest of all different unions, all different trade unions under it, so that they will be speaking for all, not only addressing issue concerning just one or what will benefit just one trade union. They have to act in interest of all the unions under it. So you can find more details about what the NLC does, and then what are those things binding under NLC. I still need to point out one or two things as far as NLC is concerned. When it comes to some type of public sector jobs, some types of jobs, they may not be part of members of the NLC. Why? Because some jobs or some workers, employees by their nature or by the contract of their employment, they don't need to come under any union. So it has been specified in your module. You read. I think those that are under the armed forces, some that are in the CBN, some communication companies, and some others. You have them in your module. Let me just quickly identify them. Some, so you have them in your module. Because of time, we may not go through all that. So we have the advantages of trade union. Most time these advantages are majorly identified within the roles they play. The roles they provide members with opportunity to access benefits from collective bargaining, shield workers from exploitation. I've already mentioned that. They are identified within the roles. They assist members in training and all those programs that can enhance their productivity. And in some instances, they provide member with legal assistance too. Is already there. They negotiate wage and salaries with employers. So they act as one voice with all those advantages that we can. Then the disadvantages too, they have all these ones, they are what you have in your modules. At times they lump all different workers together, whether those that are productive or non-productive. Once they speak, everybody benefits. So in I think in public economics there is a saying that says we have people that are free riders. Free riders, you just sit back. You have people that are already fighting for you. All you do is just to pay your due. pay monthly due or yearly due or whatever it is that you, any decision they make on your behalf, they give you feedback and then so, but there are people that can be productive, those that are unproductive, all those sorts that are not hardworking, and it's they are all highly rewarded together. So it makes it somehow difficult to separate those that can, that are actually, that have that right, that have that are actually qualified for such benefits. It lumps them all together once you claim you are a member of union. By this second one, make it more critical, and most time unions and management, they are always at loggerhead. Management will want A, unions will want B. And most time what unions always want is things that may not all that work well with management. We know that. So possibly hinder chances of training and promotion. You understand? If the management are the one that are at disadvantage, unions have spoken and they have to dance to the tune of unions. At the end of the day, management may have to withdraw some other benefit they would have given out because of labour movement agitation. So cost of productivity during labour action, we have typical example of ASUU recently for the few months strike is a typical example of what. So another one is that when they demand wage increases, most time some organization may tend to limit the number of people they employ. So at times when we say employment and unemployment or whatever, labour union activities at times can influence the ex ten t to which an organization hire. So it's their decision at times can influence hiring and firing decision of some organization. So those are the disadvantages. You can still identify more and you have more. Let's quickly look at collective bargaining. Collective bargaining is just like what's one of the instruments, is one of the instruments um that labour union use or trade union use. Is one of the instrument, not only the instrument, is one of the instruments used by labour union. Where did it start from? It started in 1897. 1897, where the name collective bargaining was coined by Sydney and Beatrice Webb in 1897. And it has since then been one of the institutionalized framework used by both governments and trade unions. So it's like a framework, one of the instruments used, like I said earlier, like it's an economic transaction between employers and employee, between a group of employers and group of employees. It can as well be between group of employees and the government, group of employers and the government. So it can be in different forms. So we will still, when we, like I said here, a negotiation between employer or group of employers on one hand, or and one or more workers organization on the other hand. So it can be between employers and group of employees, between group of employers and one or more group of employees. The negotiations are majorly on determining working condition, terms of employment and all that. It is majorly dialogue, and the dialogue that must be well documented. When we look at the elements and the processes involved, we will understand it more. The negotiations are majorly on determining working condition, the terms of employment. And another thing is it's majorly on regulating relationship between employers and workers. That is what collective bargaining is all about. And another one is that it regulates relationship between employers and their organizations and in different workers organization. So it can be between different organizations. So we can identify different way. When you see questions that are trying to test your knowledge on who are those that are majorly involved in collective bargaining. Collective bargaining can as well be between employers and their organizations and different workers organization. So it can be like I specify here, it can be between in as much as we have people that are working, that are employed, so it can be in between. So there are majorly negotiations on this that has identified. When we talk about collective bargaining, we can specifically define it as a process of arriving at or attempting to arrive at. So it might not be, it might end up with a definite agreement or indefinite one, depending on. So it is a continuous and multidimensional relationship that entails mutual acceptance between the concerned parties. So it also includes the use of tactics and pressure. So when we look at these basic elements, I will want us to between the definition, I try to highlight or draw out some elements that you should look out for when you are trying to describe what collective bargaining is. Apart from what you have in your module, you have the processes. The processes are well identified within the module, so you read that one up on your own. Read up the processes. Like, for instance, we have the stages, the stages of collective bargaining. Apart from the stages, we also have the machineries, the organs, people that are involved in collective bargaining. Remember I told you that collective bargaining is just like one of the many instruments that can be used by union, but it is one of the key instruments or one of the key forum through which union can address some issue. So we have stages, we have the machinery, and we have different things, steps that are involved in collective bargaining. But apart from those ones that you have in your module, I highlighted these basic elements, what it entails, what it should be. It is a continuous process, that's something you do on regular basis. It requires adjustment and mutual accommodation. No, everybody will have their own interest to protect. But when we talk about protection of interest, you have to consider other parties. There is a typical example I usually give. If you want 50, your employer is willing to give 30. The mutual accommodation entails that employer should at least be able to shift ground a bit to consider the 50 you are asking for, if not totally, but at least halfway. And the employee that is agitating for 50 should also consider what the employer will be able to afford in order for the business to have a going concern. So mutual accommodation means both parties or all the parties involved shifting ground a bit. Employer can come up maybe to 40, from 30 to 40. Then the employees that are agitating for 15 can at least shift back a bit to 40 instead of 50. So it requires adjustment. So it involves rules and practices. That's another important element. Rules and practices that must be followed. They are documented and must be followed. The parties involved must possess capability and willingness to negotiate. Whatever we have said so far about joining of different voices and speaking through one voice, the one voice must be one that is capable, that will be able to speak in the interest of the other voices. So any negotiation or any bargaining that requires some skills, it must, those skills must be polished, well polished. If it is oral, if it is written skill, any other skill, it must be polished. In other words, if the people if people that are speaking for you don't have that skills, then definitely it may not. So what this involve is that it must entail people going for training, especially those that are at the level of decision making. So it entails people that must be able to speak and have that capacity and ability to speak well, to document things that are not ambiguous and make it clear, and do things that are clearly for the interest of every member. It involves the use of pressure at times and tactics. The use of pressure and at times tactics, which is why you find most time unions, you have people that are always, sorry, somebody is raising up his hand. Can the person unmute and ask the question before I continue? Somebody raised up his hand.
Where is the mistake?
Yeah, whoever raised up his hand, can you? Okay, let's leave that till we are rounding up. So it also entails decision making. So the decision might not be palatable to either the party or whatever. Like I said earlier, there must be a shifting of ground and to accommodate. So on your own, in your module, I think we have criticism for collective bargaining and all that. Read all those up in the module. We also have, well, like I said, we have the stages too. What and what. There are some harms too that are involved in collective bargaining. Collective bargaining, for instance, we have the National Council, National Electoral Council or Delegate Council, Executive Council. We have different councils that must be involved, especially when it comes to the national one, national issue that affects different industries and all that. We also have some commissions that were raised specifically to address some issue. So we have different hands. So when you are reading up those stages in your module, you have to consider those other the hands, the organs that are used in collective bargaining. So apart from this, lastly, what I have is we have collective bargaining and we have collective bargaining, but most time it it might not come out the way it's supposed to. So we have some factors like I identify here. When I send the PowerPoint to you, you can read through all this. What are those factors that hinder the effectiveness of collective bargaining? Why is it that after going through all the processes, the stages, using all those organs in collective bargaining, the voices of the members spoken through one voice of the union, why is it that it is still not as effective as it used to be? So we identify some factors that are responsible for that. One of such is when there is economic recession, no matter how you agitate for it, everything, especially when the collective bargaining is on how to improve the standard of living of the members. If there is economic recession generally, there is no way that voice will be able to make that effect. They might find it difficult to push forward some arguments. I hope you understand that clearly. Economic recession, composition of representative members. Who are those that are in that? Like I said, we have organs, arms of people that come together, different organ, different um, councils or councils of elders or whatever. It depends on the composition of those that are speaking, that are acting or representing the members. Government policies too is another hindrance or another factor. Most time the government policy might not be one that will favor, especially when you consider political environment, where you know that if the government makes some action, it might not work well for their political career. So most time the unions are voiceless. Breached agreement on this one is just like when you are agreement that has been reached by both parties. When those agreements you don't follow it, to book. So that's another factor that hinder it from being effective. Then at the extent of power negotiation, remember we said something like uses of pressures and tactics. Those are part of the things. If you don't use pressure or tactics, at times some things might not work. You know, actions triggers reaction. More actions triggers more reaction. So when you take action, at times industrial action, strike at times, it might yield. So the extent of power negotiation, if you put pressure at times, the the effectiveness might be there. Collective bargaining effectiveness might come to. So apart from these hindrances or these factors that hindrance the effectiveness of collective bargaining, in your module you have a session there that talk about why is it that why collective bargaining in Nigeria is not effective. Maybe beyond these ones you can identify more. Let me just look through the module. Okay, we have why it's the processes of collective bargaining. We also have the non-unions, those that do not belong to union. If there is collective bargaining, to what extent will it affect them? If you are not a member of union, it affect them, but the effect might be positive or negative. So it depends. Then we have what we call collective agreement. Collective agreement, you can read up all that in the module. For some of you that don't have the soft copy of the module, I will advise you it's high time you try to get one. I know the one of the, I think in the second class we had, when I asked about module, I think some people said they don't have a copy of the module. I believe your class rep should have at least taken care of that by now. So I will stop sharing. I will stop sharing my screen now. I will stop sharing my screen now so that we can quickly take some questions. I think somebody was raising his hand up earlier. Can we have the question now? Questions? Is anybody raising up his hand? Or you can write your question through the chat. Any question?
Hello, ma. Good morning, ma.
Yeah, good morning.
Ma, my question is, if there's any action that has been taken by these labor unions and the government
Can you
has
speak louder?
promised,
Can you speak
if
louder?
there's, yes, ma, if there's any negotiation that has been concluded by the labor unions and the government, and probably the government did not follow up or fulfill that promise, is there any law or any legal action that can be taken against the government on that?
Is there any
Legal action that can be taken against the government on their earlier promise?
yes, there are always legal action because unions are backed legally. So there are always legal action. There are always legal action that can be taken once it is in line, once it's followed the constitution. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Is there any other question? Any other question? Do we have any other question? All right. I will try to this recording. I will make it available and